that brings us to the tight end group and Ben Sinnott, obviously behind Zach Ertz. You got John Bates, you got Cole Turner, you got Armani Rogers as well. This is also going to become, and we're way too early to get into this with any meaningfulness, but this is also going to become interesting of a numbers game. Like, do they keep 4 running backs? Do they keep 6 receivers? Do they keep 4 tight ends? Like, what do they do there? I feel like 4 tight ends is very possible, especially with Sinnott being, is he a fullback? Is he a tight end? Is he and Ertz, like kind of a quasi wide receiver at this point in his career. Like, there's just a lot of guys that have that positional crossover that you're going to use in those spots. So the days of when I was covering Jay and he had 7 receivers that he'd keep, like, that feels unlikely, but then again, we say that every year, and then there's 8 receivers that we want to keep. So that's going to be a fun August podcast for us well down the line. As for right now, Ertz, Sinnott, Bates, Turner, Rogers. I really feel like the top 3 should be kind of locked in, and then it's a matter of can Cole Turner or Armani Rogers make a case for number 4, but what do you see?
No, I think I see it the same way. And again, it kind of goes back to that big slot role and how you feel about those guys, because like, for example, Cole in college played basically receiver, like he was basically like a big wideout that would line up attached, sometimes would line up in the slot. And when I think about his body in the big slot role, like it kind of fits his skill set better. So maybe you say, oh man, maybe we could keep an extra tight end, but he's really a receiver. You know what I'm saying? So again, that'll be interesting to see how they kind of make those decisions there. Obviously, I think the drafting of Luke McCaffrey makes that a little less likely, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. But I do agree. I think it comes down to you've got your 3. I think, Bates obviously is the blocking Y, which is going to have a role in this offense. Zach is kind of that big slot piece. And then I think Ben Sinnott as that fullback guy that can kind of back up Zach in a pinch if you need to. And then I think you keep the next best guy out of that. And I think after watching Armani 2 years ago before the Achilles tear, like he would be the guy from an athletic profile standpoint. Like, talk about a flexible piece. Like, he's physical, he's snappy in line. Again, we have to see how he looks coming off the injury, but he also ran like a receiver, and I think like there is a lot of value for a coach like Cliff and for a staff that Cliff has kind of accumulated here. And we've talked about the importance of some of these selections in terms of flexibility, right? Ben Sinnott, Luke McCaffrey, that piece that could line up out wide, win a one-on-one, do that stuff for you, and also do some stuff in line seems like the right fit, but obviously he's got to be healthy. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'm kind of trying to check my bias here because, you're the same way. We're so fond of what they do in San Francisco with, all these different guys, with Kittle, with Debo, with McCaffrey, their McCaffrey, all those different guys that they move around, and like the versatility, and like, are we just seeing the possibilities here and putting something on Cliff that he's not actually doing? But it does feel like that is in his wheelhouse, and both from a creative standpoint and some of the things he has done in the past, that there will be this kind of positional versatility. And, we know that Dan believes in this as well. Right. Dan has spent some time with NBA coaches talking about positionless basketball, and how do you take some of those concepts and ideas and principles and apply them to football, offensively and defensively. And we'll talk about that when we get to the DBs and the linebackers as well, maybe even the D-line. So it's going to be interesting to see how they deploy all these guys. And the one thing I'll just say about Sinnott real quick too, and talking to some more folks who covered him in college, like, he's a really good pass catching tight end as well. It's not just like he's a smash your face fullback type.
No,
like, he's not Mike Allstott reincarnated by any stretch. He's a guy that can get out there and run routes and like route people up, and got good hands, and he's fast. And so it is going to be fun to kind of watch him move around, not just as a move tight end, but can you go then line him up outside and get a linebacker one-on-one in space? And, some of the Cliff 3x1 stuff, like, is he the one out there? Because all of a sudden they get man coverage and it's a one-on-one in a ton of space for Ben Sinnott. So there's so many options for Cliff, and obviously pairing that down into your most effective stuff is kind of Cliff and Land and everybody's job here. But it's just worth pointing out on Sinnott that, like, he's not just going to line up as a fullback. He will, but there's a lot more to it. In the same way that San Francisco does use Kyle Juszczyk and line him up all over the place. Anything else you want to add there before we get to O-line?
Yeah, and I just think, like, one of the reasons I'm making this assertion about some of this positional flexibility is because like that's what you're seeing around the league right now. And I think to Cliff's credit, he's done a really good job of adapting to what the league is presenting and seeing value. And, I remember in one of his first press conferences, an interview that I did with him for the Commanders, he was just like, we're looking for matchups. And you don't get that unless you have people like this. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's the thing I just keep coming back to is like you get a Ben Sinnott and like, hell yeah, like he's a good athlete. He has a 40-inch vertical. He ran a 4.6 whatever at the combine. But it works for him because that's not an elite athletic profile. It's very good for a tight end, but it's not elite. It works for him because he can block, right? Luke McCaffrey draws a good matchup because defensively you have to say, shoot, we have to match in Buffalo nickel because this guy can actually block too. And then Luke McCaffrey matched up on a Buffalo nickel as opposed to a true nickel. That's where the matchup advantage comes. And you mentioned the 3x1 stuff with Ben Sinnott. Like he's going to draw a linebacker because that's what Kyle Juszczyk gets, right? And people are starting to get wise to that playing San Francisco saying we can't do that. But that's another reason why San Fran can run the football. So that's what this gives you, right? I hopefully I didn't make it like that these guys are just blocking pieces, but it's the blocking physicality that gives you the offensive flexibility for good matchups. And I think that's the thing, even with guys like Armani, with Bryson Tremaine, like that is intriguing because they kind of seem to fit this physicality mold that allows you a good matchup.
Yeah, they fit the ethos. Offensive line.
This is interesting too, man. It's crazy.
Yeah. So right now, the projected starters, I would say, are Coleman at left tackle, Allegretti at left guard, Biotish at center, Cosmi right guard, Wiley right tackle. Then you got Cornelius Lucas floating around as a potential starter at tackle. Chris Paul is going to want to fight for that left guard spot. We'll see. They brought in Michael Dieter as a backup center. Mason Brooks still on the roster from last year. Trent Scott's been mentioned as a backup tackle in there. Then you got Braden Daniels, was a 4th-round pick last year. Might have not supposed to have been, but like he's a guy that would have been drafted last year. What can this group get out of him? Ricky Stromberg, a 3rd-rounder last year. Like what happens to him? Who showed some flashes? And then you got a couple other guys, Akinbulu and Good Jones, on the roster as well. But that's 10 offensive linemen that are intriguing for one reason or another, or at the very least, like in Dieter's case, like I don't know how intriguing he is, other than like he's probably going to make the team, or is going to fight to make the team as a backup interior swing guy. But a lot of intriguing, some high upside, like younger guys, and then obviously the big question at left tackle with Coleman is like, can he play it and is he ready? Seems like we should be talking about him as a tackle, or we should have been talking about him as a tackle all along. And we almost did him a disservice because he played some guard in a pinch for TCU this year. But that doesn't mean you can necessarily like play left tackle at the NFL level. So plenty of intrigue. What's the most interesting headline, if you will, from your seat?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I had to kind of give a narrative, I think it's like you probably feel good at your right tackle, right guard, center position because of how you've allocated money to those positions. And then I think you bring up a good point. Like left guard feels like, I know they brought Nick Allegretti in and I expect him to kind of get the first crack at it. But then I think because of the Mason Brooks, the Ricky Strombergs, the Chris Pauls, like I think there's going to be healthy competition at that spot. Even Braden Daniels I'd probably throw in there. So I think that's kind of a 5-man gateway there in terms of potential starting. And then you said Brandon Coleman might start. I think Cornelius Lucas, I would pencil in as the starter probably right now. I think he'll probably get the first crack at the position because I think when I don't remember, I should have looked this up before we did this podcast. That's poor work ethic on my part, but I think he started versus San Francisco last year, or he played a little bit versus San Francisco. And so I think they've seen him play. And I think when you look at how he handles his pass protection responsibilities, Corn does a pretty good job. Now, he's not always the most physical guy in the run game. He's got some limitations, but I think his length give people problems. Like when you talk to rushers around the league, like they talk about Corn as being difficult to deal with. Guys that have worked with him that I know very well, speak very highly of him. So I do think he'll probably get the first crack. And then I think Brandon Coleman and him will be in a competition because, as much as like you said we did him a disservice, the NFL on the whole, in terms of people that I talked with, had Brandon Coleman projecting to guard. So again, I think there is a pathway and physical traits and length that says he can play left tackle, but that is a possibility also that he ends up playing guard. So right now I would say Lucas is the guy at left. And then it's a competition at left guard with Allegretti getting the first crack. And then we got to see where Coleman feels most comfortable. And again, I think Coleman will play on this offensive line, whether at guard or tackle, because I think he's that good. It's just about finding the home for him, much like the previous staff did with Sam Cosmi.
Excellently timed. Speaking there, Logan, right as you got done, I was able to get the box score from PFF last year, the grades from PFF from the San Francisco game, and Cornelius Lucas did indeed play left tackle, and he graded out very well.
Yes.
He graded us out at a 73, 86 as a pass blocker, 58 in the run game. So yeah, he definitely was asked to do quite a bit, 32 pass blocking snaps, and graded out very, very well in that game. So as you said, got to be seen by Adam Peters up close and personal. And so I also think obviously it gives Coleman time. Like at the very least, it gives Coleman time if they want to try him out at tackle. But it does, if all of a sudden they get him there and it's like, oh my God, he's not a tackle, he's a guard at the NFL level. Now all of a sudden is he in the mix with Allegretti? Like it does become very interesting, but then you're also very thin at tackle. And so this is the one position where I still do feel like there could be another addition. And whether it's, everyone always wants to talk about Bakhtiari because he's the biggest name on the market. Andres Pete's still out there.
More of a guard, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see.
But to your point, I think like if there's a guy that and I think one of the things you appreciate about the staff so far is that they've found the right guys for them. So maybe it's not Bakhtiari, maybe it's the swing tackle from wherever, and he from, let's say, Buffalo, hypothetically, and he becomes the left tackle. Like they've done a good job of identifying talent and bringing the right kind of guys in. So I don't think it'll be like a top of the market guy. I think it'll be someone with some upside play that just adds some depth to that position. And, they might think of Braden Daniels as a tackle. I don't believe that to be true. I have no inside information on that, but they might think they're in a better spot there. Scott had a good year last year in terms of when he had to fill in and play. So maybe they think, hey, we're doing all right here. And if we're going to prioritize running the football, again, much like the quarterback, you can deleverage that group. I think last year with Eric Bieniemy, we saw kind of the most intense version of like stressing the offensive line in recent years. There's when you watch San Francisco or when you watch LA, when you watch Green Bay, even Miami to a certain extent, they do a great job of saying, hey, like our group is good, but they're not the best. How do we make sure that this is an easy game for them? And I think that's going to be a priority based on stuff that John Keim has said, based on stuff that Cliff's alluded to. So that's something I would also say, like, while it seems like we're a little bit naked at the offensive line in terms of depth at the tackle position, I think if you handle this correctly, you can really limit that guy's exposure and put the whole group in a better spot. And again, it comes back to the play caller with Cliff.
Yeah, it's funny because I have seen some commentary post-draft about Miami and San Francisco specifically, where some analysts have basically been like, I guess Mike and Kyle just think they can scheme around the offensive line, and they might be right. And if they are right, what does that mean for the NFL? But like that's kind of seems to be the approach.